You never, at least I never, climb a mountain for the sake of the climb, because the climb sucks. Like your legs are hurting and your lungs are hurting and you can't breathe. You don't climb a mountain for the sake of the climb. You climb the mountain for the view at the top. Yeah. Isn't that great? So all of that pain that you're experiencing at the moment, when you get to the top and you see that 360-degree view and it is breathtaking, that makes the pain worth it. This podcast explores stories of people who invest their lives to serve others. The topics and interviews in this show are intended to inspire all of us to live our best story so others can fully discover the Kingdom Effect. Hey guys, welcome to the Kingdom Effect. This is episode 13. Can you believe that, Glenn?
It's kind of weird. So some days it's like, man, I feel like we've been doing this for 10 years. And then other days I'm like, can't wait to put the next episode out.
It's amazing how much content we've covered in just that short period of time. Like thinking of all the people we've interviewed and just talking on Facebook Live a few minutes ago about things we've learned. I've just learned so much from these people and been inspired, and just wanted to give more of myself to other people and, just serve the world more just by listening to these leaders that we've talked to.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I have takeaways and learning points from each and every person we've talked to. Hopefully we have enough time tonight to get into some of that. But then again, I always hate doing that because then I always feel like I leave somebody out.
Yeah, we decided that this is probably time for us to just be the two of us and just reflect a little bit on things that we've learned. And we're going to put a little bit of Bible in tonight, which we don't normally do, but I've got a couple verses that's just on my heart for you guys as we talk about the person that God calls to do special work. What we decided to call tonight's episode is really simple. It's just qualified ? There's certain things in your life you're probably skilled in and you've got some qualifications for, but you may not feel qualified for what God calls you to. That's how it often goes. There's story after story in the Bible where people like Moses, God called him to speak to Pharaoh, and he apparently had some kind of stuttering problem and just didn't feel qualified himself. But what's cool about the Bible is that often God calls people who are not qualified, which is kind of counterintuitive, because if you think about hiring someone for a job, you're looking for the person that has the skills that you need to complete the job. What's so cool about the people God calls is they often don't have the skills that they think, or that we think that they need. And so that's one of the things, like as we've talked to all these people, they're very qualified in what they do, but just their initial call is often into something that they have no experience in, or no skills or no training in. So that's been kind of something that I think has been real common among the stories we've heard. Have you noticed that, Glenn?
Yeah, absolutely. Even in my own experience, being called into different types of service, whether it was leading worship at church, or whether it was, joining the military or the police force, or, ultimately doing the human trafficking work, you're always like, man, God, why me? So many other people out here that are more qualified than me. I can ask why, but doesn't mean you have to tell me. I just have to go do it. Maybe one day you'll tell me why you picked me. It's really easy to doubt yourself, for sure.
For sure. One of the things I like to think about when I'm thinking about the person God calls to specific things is the disciples, like the 12 disciples Jesus called. There was somewhere around 300 million people on the planet when Jesus walked. So there was plenty of people to choose from. And even if you just wanted to pick a Jew, like somebody that was qualified in Jewish law, there was, we don't know exactly, but I've heard as low as 1.2 million Jews and as high as 5 million. So there were a lot of Jews on the planet at the time that were very highly qualified. But he chose 12 of the most unlikely people. And we know they were unlikely because they were working in their families' businesses. Most of them were fishermen that were working with their dads or their families, or there was a tax collector that actually probably worked for the Roman government, and just people that you would not expect Jesus to select to change the world forever. Like if you think about the history of the world, right down the middle of history is this dividing line. We used to call it BC and AD. There's other names now, but there's only really one thing to point to in the middle, and that's Jesus. So his life radically changed history, legitimately changed history. And he picked 12 guys to do it with. Those guys were not currently following a rabbi until he called them. So we know that there were 3 levels of Hebrew school at the time. The elementary version started at about 4 or 5 years old, and all they did was memorize the first 5 books of the Bible. I'm sure you got those committed to memory, right,
Oh
Glenn?
yeah. And in Hebrew too.
Yeah, right. Word for word, the first 5 books. And then around the age of 10 or so, they entered their high school phase. They had already learned the first 5 books, and the ones that really were successful actually went on to the next level and studied the prophets and the writings. But the ones that didn't actually went back and helped their family and their family businesses, which that's how we know that the 12 disciples Jesus selected were probably actually flunkies. So they probably flunked out of once they got through elementary school, they flunked out of school. And then the cream of the crop beyond that went to a 3rd level of school where they were actually chosen. A specific rabbi would just pick the top of the class, like the cream of the crop. And literally a rabbi would go to a person and ask them to follow him. Mm-hmm. And they would leave whatever they were doing in life and follow him as their teacher. And there wasn't really a reason at that point to give them more knowledge. It wasn't about giving them more knowledge because they'd already memorized the first 5 books of the Bible and memorized the prophets and the literature portion of the Bible, the art portion of the Bible. So it became about becoming like me. So it wasn't, I want to teach you what I know. It was, I want to impart to you a life that you can live that's like mine. So I want you to think like me. I want you to act like me. I want you to teach like me. And that's what a rabbi was. A rabbi chose specific disciples, or what they were called talmidim, to follow him and become like him. And again, you would think that the rabbi would pick the cream of the crop, but he picked the flunkies. So it's just totally counterintuitive, right?
I think there's a lot, you always hear that, God chooses people that are not qualified so that when they do accomplish all of these great things, it's easier to see God accomplish these things and not, the person that he chose or called to go do this. And then also you mentioned, you kind of equated this to interviewing somebody for a job. Like I know in my field, I can hire somebody at my office that's super qualified that I can hire them and turn them loose, or I can bring somebody in that has no experience. And a lot of times I'll go with the person with no experience just because they have no bad habits. I can teach them to do it the way that I want them to do it. And so, we talk about that 3rd level, that highest level of the students, you got to think they're coming in when they get to, following rabbi stage, they've probably got their minds made up and have their own opinions on things. And so, I think it's meekness, Jesus chose those that would do things, that weren't arrogant about it, that weren't doing it for recognition, recognition or, the glory of it. And then also people that you would go, man, how'd that guy do that? God must be in that, because that guy's a bonehead. He doesn't really know what he's doing.
Yeah, true. That's so good. So I agree. 2 reasons he probably chooses the unqualified is 1, he gets the glory, and 2, he doesn't have to unteach them, which is kind of what you're saying. They haven't. The pride and the arrogance is not there, so he doesn't have to get rid of any of that before he starts actually training them. So one of the reasons I'm excited about talking about this tonight, and you probably are too, Glenn, is that I think there's people out there listening to us that God's going to call into a really great work. He calls you to great things, so initially you're going to feel like it can't be you, like you don't have what it takes and you're not qualified. But we just want to encourage you tonight to say yes. Really, that's I think the heartbeat of what God's looking for is somebody that's willing to say yes, even if it's scary, even if they don't feel qualified. So one of the things Jesus did often when he was screening people and looking for the people that he was going to choose to do works is he almost pushed them beyond their level of understanding so that they would have to say yes in faith. So there's a really great example in John chapter 6. The religious elite was kind of questioning Jesus about who he was. And he made a pretty radical statement. He said, he's the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. The bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. Think about if you had turned your back on your family's business to follow this rabbi, right? Or you had made some radical decision to turn away from the world you knew and to follow this guy, and your whole life was changed, and you staked everything, all of your trust was in this guy, and then you heard him say that in order to follow me, you have to eat my flesh and drink my blood.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? What if you were one of those guys that had turned away from everything, and that's what you heard?
It kind of, on the surface, it kind of sounds like, some Jim Jones,
Yeah, right.
David Koresh type stuff, but yeah, it's weird. We interviewed Leon Hayes, Simba, on last week's episode, and here you got a 65-year-old man who literally sold every one of his possessions and moved to Kenya to, live in the bush, at 65 years old. And that blows my mind. I read the book Radical by David Platt when he first wrote that book, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, yeah, I mean, that is a radical example of obedience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've done that, and then your teacher says, in order to continue, and they actually questioned him and said, like, they looked at, like, Jesus's followers looked at him and said, man, that is a really hard thing to say. Like, they're just thinking probably about what all these people were thinking about their teacher. And he just doubled down on it, man. 3 times in a row, I tell you the truth, unless you eat my flesh, eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. And he says it 2 more times. And the cool thing about this is he was testing their willingness to believe in him, even when it didn't make sense. And he knew, like, just a few weeks later, he knew he was going to reveal to them what that meant at the Last Supper, when he said, this drink represents my flesh, and I'm sorry, this bread represents my flesh, and this drink represents my blood. And anytime you eat and drink, which is the most common thing we do 3 times a day, or you probably go 4 times a day. But one of the most common things you do is feed yourself. And he says, every time you feed yourself, remember that I died for you. And he knew that was coming. Like, he was aware that was going to be something he instituted for his followers, but they didn't know that. And it's almost like he's saying, if you'll stick with me, if you'll not turn away and continue to follow, I'm going to reveal all this stuff to you and show you what it means. But there's right after that, right after the red section, the Jesus section of that, it says that on hearing this, many of his disciples said, this is a hard teaching. Later on, it said many of them turned away. And then he turned to his 12, the 12 that we know, and said, what about you? Do you want to leave too? And Peter said, where would we go? Like, we don't have anywhere to go. Like, you're our everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, what Jesus was doing there was testing their hearts, testing their faith, testing their trust in him, because he knew he was going to reveal what he meant, but they didn't know. And so what he basically was doing was asking them, are you willing to follow me even when it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, too, get them ready for what's to come, like all the stuff that's going to happen, during the crucifixion and what takes place right before that and after. This is probably everybody's favorite disciple, but my favorite disciple is Peter, just because he was continuously a bonehead throughout, scripture, but he was also the one that just dove head first. Like, to me, he had the biggest faith of all the disciples.
Yeah. And those that stayed with him eventually understood the things that at the time didn't make any sense at all. So I don't know, man, like, think about, you've started a couple of organizations and a couple businesses, I think. I think back to the time when you knew that God was calling you into something. What was that like? Did you question yourself? Did you question God? Or have you always just kind of been the guy that said, let's go, let's do this?
Well, actually, a little bit of both. You know me well, and some of the listeners, probably know me well. And I'm a very, like, let's go get it. I'm passionate about the things that I do. But I remember with the human trafficking stuff, I was working the Internet Crimes Against Children at the time, and just covering 19 counties in the state of Tennessee, basically by myself. And I just remember sitting in church and hearing God tell me, you've got to do something more, with these survivors. And I remember thinking, man, God, I hear you, but how? I've got a newborn at home. I'm covered up as it is at work. I barely have time to do what's already asked of me, and now you're wanting me to take on even more. And I'll tell you what, being someone who's married or having a significant other even, and them knowing that you're spending all your time hanging out with, I hate this word, but just so everybody understands, hanging out with prostitutes, that was really hard for my spouse, to know that not only was I, hanging out and doing the whole nonprofit ministry thing, but doing the rescues, having to actually set up the dates and go in the hotel rooms and, kind of go through this process. And then, kind of throughout, doing this for so many years, there was a time where I felt like God turned his back on me during this ministry. And I'm like, man, God, why'd you even call me to do this if you weren't going to protect me in these different areas of life? Like, how was that fair? I won't say that I ever lost faith in God, but we had some strong talks, between the two of us. But yet, no matter what, looking back, I didn't see it at the time, but I see now why God allowed those different things to happen, and why he called me to do that. The timing was just spot on. At the time you don't see that, but in hindsight, looking back, you see that it was spot on, and then you're glad that you remained obedient and stayed in it and didn't give up and didn't throw the towel in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I hear that in a lot of these stories that we hear from these nonprofit founders. People often ask, how do you know that God's calling you into something, or God has called you into something? And my answer to that generally is that you look at like the sum of your life, right? Like you look at your past and your experiences and what's happened to you. And then secondly, you look into your heart. What is it that you almost can't say no to? I've heard it said before, if you could give your life to something and not have to worry about getting paid for it, what would you do? How would you spend your life, if money didn't exist? So looking at the history of your life, where God's brought you, the people he's put into your life, looking into your heart at your passions and your desires, I think God puts all of those in us in order to get us to where he's calling us to. I think it's Psalm 139 that says he knit you together in your mother's womb. And then in Ephesians 2:10, it talks about the good works that he prepared in advance for you to do. So if you take those two concepts and put them together, then God, even all the way back to your mother's womb, as God was forming you, he was giving you everything you needed to complete the good works that he had planned for you to do in the future.
Yeah.
A lot of these young leaders we talk to, something happens in their life. Like, for example, remember when Amanda Root talked about losing a child and how that gave her so much passion for foster children who need a better life. And I remember, well, we haven't talked to her yet, but there's a girl named Rachel Peck from 431 House here in the Nashville area who takes in women and helps them just kind of get their feet back under them after they've been through a really hard time. And that came out of her being introduced to a lady at her workplace who needed help. And God just given her just a great compassion for this lady. And had that lady not walked in the office and asked for help when she did, Rachel, 10 years later would not be doing a great work for lots of other women. So yeah, just looking at the patterns of our lives, the things that's happened to us, even the tragedy of our life, will be tied into God's calling.
Well, I'll tell you what's always been kind of a thermometer or discernment technique for me is I can't think of anything that God's called me to do in my life that was easy. Not that it's bad the whole time. It's certainly some of the most rewarding service that you do, but I can't think of a single time where it was like, easy, no hardships, no, because if you're truly in, God's will for your life and being obedient to God, then that means you're effecting the kingdom, right? You're changing things for the kingdom, and man, the enemy's going to kick you in the teeth every day.
Right.
That was always a good way for me to know that I'm still on track here, because man, I just keep getting attacked and attacked and attacked, day after day.
How do you overcome that? Like when you're in the middle of an attack and you know that you're being attacked because you've said yes and you've taken some steps in the right direction.
Well, I'm a pretty even keel, go with the flow kind of guy anyway. I always tell people I do my best work when I'm under a lot of stress, or I've got a time crunch or something like that. But man, that's just where you have those talks with God, and you're like, okay, I need some help. I'm here, I'm doing what you asked me to do, but I need your help. It's also the times where you go, okay, I'm really getting my teeth kicked in right now. I need to step away from this for a minute. Some people may call that taking a sabbatical, or for me, it was, okay, I'm going to take the week and just go camp and hike. And, that was the way that I kind of reset myself, hit the reset button, and, kind of got rejuvenated and re-inspired. And it's important to know your limit when you've got to say, hey, God, I'm here. I need your help today more than maybe ever before. And then also being aware that, okay, I need to hit the reset button for a minute and take a step back.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, but my life pretty radically changed when I started like putting regular rhythms in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's been about a year ago now that I decided I was going to take Saturdays seriously, like Sabbath seriously. And I just started dialing down Friday night to Saturday night. And it's weird because it seems like it would take a ton of time out of your life, but it feels like it gives you more time.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the principle of tithing, It's like when you say yes and you're willing to give a portion of your income, somehow God returns it. And you don't do it for that reason, but it's just a spiritual principle. And so when I built that regular 24-hour rest period into my week, it seems like I have so much more time to do other things. And then I also kind of instituted a once a month I get away, usually go to the woods. I love waterfalls, so I'll get away for a half a day once a month, and and it's really a discipline. Both the Saturday thing and the monthly thing is a discipline because my flesh wants to just keep working and doing more, and filling that time with other things. But somehow when you really commit to doing it the way God wants you to do it, it's counterintuitive how it works.
Yeah. Well, you've got to have that balance, especially if you want to preserve your other relationships, whether it's with your wife or kids or whomever. You've got to be able to balance it out, because they may not be called to the same thing you are. As a spouse, they're called to support you and love you through what you're doing, but they may not be called to fight human trafficking or go into strip clubs or stand outside Planned Parenthood. The spouses may not be called to that, so you have to keep that in mind, that just because this is my passion that God's given me, it may not be the passion of the people that I'm in relationships with. So you really have to be intentional about making time for at home and for those relationships too.
Yeah, and how that ties into what we're talking about is that's where I'm clearest about what God's calling me to it, at any particular time in my life, is when I add those rhythms in and take time to get away from work and just allow God space, to speak to me and direct me and guide me without all the emotions and the day-to-day grind. It's just a great opportunity to create space where God can talk to you.
For me, it's being outdoors. For some people, it's being at the gym or, whatever, fill in your blank, where your quiet space is. Man, I just have some of the most profound revelations in my life when I'm hiking 40 miles in the woods with a 50-pound backpack on. For me, that's just where I'm able to clear my mind of everything else.
And that's what God's really looking for in someone that he can call, is someone that's willing to, change their life a little bit, sacrifice a few things for his sake, and at the place where I work, we always say we hire culture first and we train skills, and that's kind of how God does too. I
Yeah.
think he never gives you what you need to accomplish a task before you say yes, or I should say, very rarely.
Mm.
So typically, he's waiting on you to say yes before he provides you with either the skills or the resources that you need to do it.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what's cool too. God sends the right people into your life as you need it too. I think we may have said this before on some other episodes, but even like our relationship, when you and I met, there was some stuff going on within the team, and you became more than just Kevin at Groove Life, and the Impact team. You became, Kevin the mentor, Kevin the friend, Kevin the guy that likes to go hiking with me. I really needed that relationship, and God knew that, and allowed that to happen. So, and that happened all throughout my life, doing the trafficking stuff and various different things. When times got hard, God always found a way to implant somebody into my circle, into my tribe that was exactly who I needed at that moment.
Yeah, I lived in Colorado for a couple of years. We were church planting out there, and I wanted to stay. Like, everything inside of me was like, this is where I want to spend the rest of my life. But my wife was miserable. And it was because she was born in Florida, so it's low, wet, and hot. And we lived at, like, I don't know, 6,000 feet high, and it was dry and cold. And literally, she would wake up in the morning and her skin would be cracking around her fingernails and bleeding. And then we had also some relational issues out there, and she was miserable. So I remember climbing a mountain behind our house one day, and God just made it extremely clear that I needed to get her back to close to her family for her sake. And I was really sad, because I love being in the mountains, and it was an amazing experience out there. But we came back and immediately got pregnant. And looking back on it, and when I was sitting on top of that mountain, and I felt like I was hearing the direction from the Lord, and it didn't make sense, and I was kind of sad about it for me. But that just gave me so much confidence that when we moved back home, we got pregnant immediately. She got pregnant immediately. That it gave me so much confidence that I had heard from the Lord, and made the right decision. But I tried and tried and tried to find a job literally for months, and I couldn't find a job, and I ended up taking a outside insurance sales position, which I was super miserable. Not that that's a bad job if you're suited for it. It just wasn't my job. But I was like, again, I felt like the Lord told me to take that job, but I just did not want to do it. I kind of went kicking and screaming into it and said yes to it. We didn't have any health insurance and no money at all. And Julie had just gotten pregnant. It was our first child, so we were terrified. And we had talked to a doctor at our church because we just didn't have the money to pay for a doctor's visit even. And he said, well, you're really okay until this particular date. I mean, to the day, I don't remember the date, but we'll just call it, I don't know, May the 14th. But, by May the 14th, you really need to get in and see a doctor. And so I kept looking for a job. And somewhere around the first week of May, that one popped open, and I decided to take it. And we were still like rolling closer and closer to May the 14th, and knew that we had to get her to the doctor. So without knowing how we were going to pay for it, without having any insurance, we made the appointment. And I went in for like an orientation to the job on May the 13th. I knew that I would eventually get insurance, but I assumed, there was like the 60-day waiting period or something like that. And as I was walking around out of the office after I finished my orientation, the guy that was orienting me said, hey, by the way, your health insurance starts on the first day of your job, and we'd like for you to come in tomorrow.
Oh,
So
wow.
the very day, which was 24 hours before the day that the guy said you really need to see a doctor, and we had made the appointment by faith, that very day our insurance kicked in. So it was just God saying, I'm telling you, I'm going to give you what you need when you need it. But
Yeah.
he loves to test our faith,
Yeah. And that's the thing, people that are listening that are hearing this, and if we can give you any encouragement at all, we're not going to lie to you. It's hard. It's going to be hard. It's going to be tough. The enemy's going to kick you in your teeth. Without fail, God always fills in the blanks. God always makes things happen, always takes care of you. That's a promise. I mean, that's a promise that's in scripture, time and time again. And sometimes it's easy to forget that or doubt that, or, man, where are you at, God? I needed you last week, not May the 14th. I needed you, April the 3rd, but he's going to get there. I can't think of a single time where, maybe at the time I was frustrated and angry, and where are you at, God? And, God, why does this suck so bad? And, things like that. But again, when you get to the finish line and you look back, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
And it makes all of that worth, all that you went through, worth it for sure.
Yeah, that's totally true. It's every time you think something doesn't make sense and you look back on it after you've kind of gotten your feet back under you, it's like, oh, of course, of course God knew what was coming.
Yeah. So just have the endurance and the perseverance. I can remember being in the military and doing these tasks that just seemed, you got to be superhuman to do this. But if you have the desire and the passion and just the mental and emotional endurance to get to the finish line, to the end, when you start out, you're like, gosh, how am I ever going to do this? How am I ever going to, march 30 miles in the snow? And once you get to the end, you're like, oh man, I did that. It's like, let's go do it again. So it's really cool. And that's where the reward comes from. You get to the end and you're like getting to see someone rescued from trafficking, a survivor, and seeing them years later, and they've gotten their children back, and they've graduated from college, and they're doing all these things. And it's not one of those, pat yourself on the back kind of accomplishments. It's one of those that, man, okay, God, I get it now. I get why the struggle was so hard. And this is the reward, not for me, but eternally, for the struggle that was gone through to get that survivor to that point. To me, that's better than money. That's better than any type of recognition or reward you can get, is just to see God move and redeem somebody that's in that position.
Yeah. We were talking about hiking, and I shared this with someone the other day, that I never climb a mountain for the sake of the climb, because the climb sucks. Like your legs are hurting and your lungs are hurting and you can't breathe. You don't climb a mountain for the sake of the climb. You climb the mountain for the view at the top, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that great? So all of that pain that you're experiencing at the moment, when you get to the top and you see that 360-degree view, and it is breathtaking, that makes the pain worth it.
I remember the first time I was going to hike the Gizzard, which is what we're going to do in a couple of weeks. Tropical Storm Nate rolled through the night before I started, and it rained the entire 10 hours it took me to do the trail. I had people tell me, why'd you do it? Why didn't you just come home? Why didn't you, and part of that's my personality. I loved the extra challenge of doing it. But I told him, I said, you know what? I did it. I completed it. Not only did I complete the trail, but I did it under these circumstances with this added challenge. And so now when a typical challenge comes up in my life, whether it's something at work or something, at home or something like that, I can go, this isn't as big as hiking the Gizzard in Tropical Storm Nate, right? If I can get through that, I can get through anything. And so that was just a real good experience for me, where I was able to challenge myself and know that I can persevere, I can endure, and God's at the finish line.
Yeah. So a couple of things just as we're wrapping up that we just want to put before you. Maybe deep down in your heart that God's called you to do something and you're holding back because it seems impossible, or that it's going to be very difficult, or that it's going to create challenges in your life. It will be worth it. So we want to just encourage you to say yes and get out there and do it. Just put one foot in front of the other. That's all you got to do. Put your right foot in front of your left foot, take a little break, rest, put your left foot in front of your right foot, and just keep doing it over and over, and God will see you through. And you'll be so thankful that you said yes. You chose to say yes. But then there's might be some more of you out there that's just have said yes, and then you're in the middle of it, and it's just brutal. You might even be thinking right now, if I knew it was going to be like this, I probably would not have taken the first step. And we just want to tell you to stay encouraged, keep pushing. The summit is ahead, and when you get there, you'll look back and say it wasn't so bad after all. So we just want to encourage you to keep pushing forward and keep saying yes every single day.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Those of you that are maybe thinking about something, or God's calling you to something you haven't started yet, when you say yes, let us know for sure. Let us, Kevin and I, know. We'd love to pray for you and support you however we can. And then for those of you that, as Kevin just mentioned, that are in this and have been in it, and you're just discouraged, and man, reach out to Kevin or I. We'd love to talk to you, share experiences with you, just listen to you. Again, pray for you. Don't be discouraged. It's so easy to feel like you're alone. Kevin and I can both say with confidence on this podcast, you're not alone. You've always got Glenn and Kevin that you can reach out to for some encouragement.
Yep. How can they do that?
You can do that by, a bunch of different ways. You can reach out to us through our email, which is kingdomeffectpodcast@gmail.com. You can shoot us a message on Facebook. If you know Kevin or I personally, you probably have our cell phone numbers. You can reach out to us that way. Please reach out if that's you, if that's your story. You're in a place where you just need some encouragement. We'd love to be a part of that.
Yeah, that could even be, it doesn't have to be starting a ministry or a nonprofit organization. It could just be life in general. So we want to be here for you, or at least point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
So, cool. Anything to add before we close out?
I think that's it, man. Just always remember, guys, please like, comment, and share on Facebook. And then, as you guys know, the day after we do the Facebook Live, we put the audio version of this podcast onto all the major podcast formats. So if you miss it here, or even if you watch it here, at least please go to the show on the podcast format and, leave a review, do something so that we can, again, Kevin and I don't do this to make a living or anything. But the more people that like and share these things, the more these different formats make it available to the general public. So our goal here is just to have as many people as possible, hear about these other ministries and nonprofits and organizations, and hopefully encourage a lot of folks.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll chat with you next week on the Kingdom Effect.